Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. For generations, the story of how we became farmers was simple. It began, we were told, in one place, the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East around 10,000 years ago. This single spark of genius, the domestication of wheat and goats, was seen as the start of civilization, an idea that spread across the world. But what if that story is wrong? What if the dawn of agriculture wasn't a single sunrise, but a symphony of dawns, erupting independently in unconnected corners of the globe? A wealth of new evidence reveals a far more complex and fascinating story of human ingenuity, and today, we're going to rewrite that story. Let's start with the place the old story got right, the Fertile Crescent. This region, stretching from the Persian Gulf to Egypt, truly was a cradle of agriculture. Its unique geography hosted the wild ancestors of what we call the Neolithic founder crops, 8 key plants: emmer and einkorn wheat, barley, lentils, peas, chickpeas, bitter vetch, and flax. These plants were practically begging to be domesticated. The transition wasn't an overnight switch. As far back as 23,000 years ago, people were intensively harvesting wild grains. At monumental sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, built by hunter-gatherers, we see evidence of early cultivation. This was a long, slow process of trial and error, selecting plants with bigger seeds or stronger stalks that didn't shatter when harvested. By 9500 BCE, true domesticated wheat and barley were a reality. Soon after, animal domestication followed, first with goats and sheep, then pigs and cattle. This agricultural package was a runaway success. It allowed for reliable food surpluses, which in turn led to permanent settlements. Villages like Jericho grew into the world's first towns, complete with defensive walls. This revolution created a new world. Populations grew. People invented pottery to store grain and irrigation to expand farmland. Social structures became more complex, with a ruling or priestly class likely emerging to manage the food surplus. In fact, writing itself is believed to have started as a way to keep records of agricultural goods. The Fertile Crescent's role is undeniable, but it was just the first act in a global play. Now, let's travel east, to the great river valleys of ancient China, where not one, but 2 entirely separate agricultural systems were born. In the humid, subtropical south, along the Yangtze River, the star of the show was rice. As early as 10,000 years ago, people began the long process of domesticating wild rice. At sites like Shangshan, archaeologists have found rice husks mixed into pottery, and by 700 years ago, rice farming was well established. These early farmers developed the sophisticated paddy field system, managing water with incredible precision, a technique still fundamental to rice cultivation today. But travel north, to the drier climate of the Yellow River Valley, and you find a completely different agricultural world. Here, the staples were 2 types of millet, foxtail and broomcorn. Domestication occurred around 8,000 years ago, transforming these hardy wild grasses into a reliable food source for a growing population. And just like in the Fertile Crescent, animals were part of the package. Pigs were domesticated in China as far back as 10,000 years ago, a perfect fit for settled life, followed by chickens around 8,000 years ago. This dual revolution, rice in the south, millet in the north, fueled the growth of villages, complex societies, and eventually the first Chinese dynasties, shaping 2 distinct regional cultures that would define China for millennia. Now, let's jump across the Pacific to Mesoamerica, a region stretching from central Mexico to Costa Rica. Here, a completely different agricultural revolution was underway, based on a trio of crops so ingenious we still call them the 3 sisters: maize, beans, and squash. The process was staggered. Squash appears to be the first, domesticated 10,000 years ago, likely for its nutritious seeds and for use as containers. Next came the icon of the Americas, maize or corn. Genetic evidence shows it was domesticated from a wild grass called teosinte in southern Mexico around 9,000 years ago. The transformation from teosinte's tiny, hard kernels to the large, soft cobs of maize is one of the most remarkable feats of selective breeding in human history. Beans were domesticated later, completing the trio. The genius of the three sisters is their symbiosis. Planted together, the cornstalk provides a trellis for the beans to climb. The beans, in turn, fix nitrogen in the soil, fertilizing the corn and squash, and the squash's broad leaves spread out, shading the ground to retain moisture and prevent weeds. It's a perfect, sustainable ecosystem on a small plot of land. Mesoamerican farmers didn't stop there. In the swampy valley of Mexico, the Aztecs perfected chinampas, or floating gardens. They wove reeds together to form artificial islands, piled them high with rich mud from the lake bed, and created incredibly fertile plots that could be harvested up to 7 times a year, feeding the massive population of their capital, Tenochtitlan. This agricultural foundation paved the way for the great Olmec, Maya, and Zapotec civilizations. From Mesoamerica, we travel south to the challenging high-altitude environment of the Andes Mountains. Here, another unique agricultural system emerged, adapted to the harsh conditions. The stars were the potato and quinoa. Potato domestication began as early as 10,000 years ago. Over thousands of years, Andean farmers developed thousands of varieties, adapted to different elevations and climates. They also invented a brilliant food preservation technique, creating chuño by freeze-drying potatoes in the cold mountain air, allowing them to be stored for years as a buffer against famine. Quinoa, a highly nutritious grain-like crop, was domesticated around 7,000 years ago, providing a vital source of protein. Andean peoples also domesticated a unique set of animals. Llamas and alpacas were domesticated around 6,000 years ago. Llamas as pack animals for the rugged terrain, and alpacas for their fine wool. Even the guinea pig was domesticated as an important and easy-to-raise source of meat. To farm the steep mountainsides, they engineered andines, or terrace farms. These stone walls created level plots, prevented erosion, and managed water. In the plains around Lake Titicaca, they developed waru-waru, a system of raised planting beds separated by canals. The water in the canals absorbed the sun's heat during the day and released it at night, protecting crops from frost. This agricultural mastery was the economic engine for powerful civilizations like the Inca, whose centralized state depended on the organization and control of this high-altitude food production. The story doesn't end with the great empires. In the tropical regions of the Amazon and New Guinea, people developed sophisticated farming based on root and tree crops. For a long time, the Amazon was thought to be a counterfeit paradise, too poor in nutrients to support large societies. We now know that's wrong. People there domesticated manioc and sweet potatoes as far back as 10,000 years ago. But their most remarkable innovation was terra preta, or Amazonian black earth. They systematically enriched the poor soil by adding charcoal, pottery shards, and other organic waste. This wasn't slash and burn, it was slash and char. The charcoal created a super-fertile, stable soil that supported large, complex societies. Meanwhile, in the highlands of New Guinea, another independent revolution was happening. At the Cook Swamp archaeological site, we see evidence of agriculture by 7,000 years ago, based on draining wetlands to create mounds for growing taro and bananas, which are native to the region. This was a completely different model, based on vegetatively propagating plants from cuttings, not seeds. The African continent also witnessed multiple independent agricultural origins. The old idea that farming simply spread there from the Fertile Crescent has been completely overturned. In the Sahel region, south of the Sahara, sorghum and pearl millet were domesticated around 3000 BCE. In West Africa, a distinct system based on yams and African rice emerged in the Niger River basin. And the Ethiopian highlands gave the world unique crops, like the nutritious grain teff and, of course, coffee. Each system was a unique response to local conditions, fueling population growth and the rise of complex societies across the continent. Finally, let's uncover a forgotten revolution in the eastern woodlands of North America. For years, it was assumed agriculture arrived there as a package from Mesoamerica. But we now know that long before maize became dominant, Native Americans in this region domesticated their own unique set of crops, known as the Eastern Agricultural Complex. Around 500 BCE, they were cultivating sunflower, sumpweed, and a relative of quinoa called chenopod. These lost crops supported a more settled lifestyle and complex cultures like the Hopewell, known for their extensive trade networks and monumental earthworks. Maize was eventually introduced, but it didn't become a staple until around 900 CE. Its high productivity eventually led to the abandonment of the original native crops, which faded into obscurity. The story of the Eastern Agricultural Complex is a powerful reminder of how much history is still being uncovered. So the dawn of agriculture was not a singular event. It was a global phenomenon, a mosaic of innovation driven by human ingenuity in response to local environments. From the highlands of the Andes to the river valleys of China, from the swamps of New Guinea to the woodlands of North America, our ancestors independently unlocked the secrets of cultivation. This new story reveals a past that is not a simple, linear progression from one source, but a rich tapestry of creativity. It shows us that our ancient relatives all over the world were brilliant scientists and innovators, shaping the planet and creating the foundations of the world we live in today.